you've done that.
Absolutely.
Yes, and will you please call the roll to declare a quorum?
Yes. Counselor Wong.
Present.
Counselor Lewis.
Present.
Counselor Rosenthal.
Present.
Counselor Gonzalez.
Present.
Counselor Nolan.
Present.
Council President Peterson is excused and Deputy Council President Simpson.
Present. Council President Peterson called to let me know she'll be in about 15 minutes late.
Great, thank you.
Before we begin our agenda items, can we please play the safety video for our in-person attendees? Any problems?
Jason, I'm an event production manager. Here at the Portland 5 Centers for the Arts, safety is our #1 priority, not only for our guests, but for our staff members. I'm at the Portland 5 Centers for the Arts, and you're at the Metro Regional Center. The council chambers are located on the 3rd floor. In the event of a fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room. Go down the stairway to the 2nd floor, exit through the main entrance by the reception desk, and gather in the courtyard outside that entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the reception desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you, and come visit us at Portland 5.
Okay. Thank you. Counselors, our one work session topic today is directly connected to the long-term success and vibrance of our communities. Metro's future vision is our 50-year vision for the greater Portland region. Updating the future vision is required by Metro Charter, but is also an exciting opportunity to plan for the future that we want to make together and to make sure everyone in our community can thrive. Last fall, we gave staff feedback on the makeup of the Future Vision Commission and started conversations about the scope of this work. Today, staff are here to pick up the scoping conversation and hear council discussion about our hopes for this project.
Recording in progress.
Oh, you're okay. Here with us, Malou Wilkinson, Deputy Director of Planning, Development, and Research, and Jess Zadeb, Principal Regional Planner. Malou and Jess, thank you for joining us. And if you could please introduce the consultants we have today.
Good morning. We are really happy to be here today. We have our consultant team here as well, who's going to help facilitate the conversation. And they'll introduce themselves in a few minutes. But again, I'm Malou Wilkinson. I'm the Deputy Director of the Planning, Development, and Research Department. And I use she, her pronouns. We're really excited to be back here with you today to help refine how you as a council want to approach updating our region's 50-year vision. But I'm hoping that Marisa would kick us off.
Thank you, Malou. Good morning, Council. It's exciting to begin this journey with you to define the 50-year vision for the region. As some of you know, I just returned from my alumni conference at the Naval Postgraduate School, where I was able to spend 3 days talking with experts from around the nation about homeland, national, and global security. A lot of people think about security as physical security, like the TSA at the airport or metal detectors at a concert. But the security field actually attracts futurists from many different disciplines: technology, emergency management, public health, who are looking for patterns, trends, and frameworks that allow them to forecast the future and then proactively work to mitigate risks. I bring this up because in this visioning process, we are all futurists, trying to define what we want our region to look like and feel like in 50 years, when many of us in this room will be gone, or hopefully in my case, entertaining the staff at the nursing home. I also bring it up because one of the things that came up over and over again at my conference last week across diverse disciplines is that the speed of technological and therefore societal change is outpacing our ability to react to it, let alone plan for it, which is tough for a planning organization. They said the determining factor in success in the future will not be strength, it will be adaptability. To me, that means that we're going to have to do more navigating by compass instead of following a predetermined set of directions to achieve our 50-year vision, whatever that ends up being. I also believe that it means that today we should, as much as possible, stay focused on defining our vision, our values, and therefore our compass, and set aside the tactics and solutions for now, because a tactic that works today may not in the next 6 months, year, or 2 years. So even though there are a lot of challenges that our community is facing right now, I encourage us all to allow ourselves the space to truly dream and vision without simultaneously problem solving in this moment. So with that, I'll kick it back to you, Malou.
Thank you. Georgia, can we start the presentation, please? Thank you. So I also want to start out just by reminding you all that while planning, development, and research is executing this effort, we're collaborating with other departments. This updated future vision should really help inform all of our agencies' work. So I just wanted to emphasize that as well. And as Marisa said, our charter requires us to have a 50-year vision and to update it every 15 years. The one that we're currently using was developed in 1995, and we did bring you all paper versions. Councilor Wong and Councilor Lewis will make sure that you have them as well, because I know for me, I read things very differently on paper, and I see you actually looking at it, which is wonderful, because it's good to know what we have in place now, to know where you all want to take this in the future. A lot has changed. Some of what's in here, really, there's a lot of great information and great visioning, but it's important for us to move into the 21st century and agree as a region on how we want to approach that. So as you heard, we were in front of council twice last year, in July and September, when we provided you information on existing metro plans and policies. You gave us some guidance on the makeup of a future vision commission, and we began a discussion on the scope and scale of this work, including the way that you would like to engage people across the region. We heard from you that I'm sorry, I forgot about the slideshow. Can you click to the, or Georgia, we just need to go 2 slides forward. This one, thank you. We heard from you that the updated vision should address some important new topics, including economic prosperity, racial equity, climate adaptation and resiliency, and arts and culture. We also heard that we need to be considering known and not yet understood demographic, economic, and other trends that might impact our region's future. And as defined in our charter, the role of the Future Vision Commission is to define and recommend a future vision to you, the Metro Council, for your consideration and adoption. In September, you directed that the commission should be a manageable size of around 18 to 21 members who were identified through a well-publicized application process. This group will be broadly representative of the region's geography and interest groups, have different lived and professional experience, and will also offer tribes an opportunity to participate in this visioning process. Our commission members, as we heard from you all, should have a systems thinking approach that will allow them to consider the multiple overlapping topics that a future vision might discuss. And we're in the process of identifying those commissioners. We've let you all know that that application is still open, and it will close on April 15th. We are really excited to currently have a lot of terrific applicants, but if there are any people that you would really like to see, we hope that you will encourage them to apply. And last fall, when we began to discuss the full scope of updating the future vision, it really became clear to us that we needed to continue to work with the council to get more definition on your goals for the future vision process before proceeding further. And that's why we have brought on HRNA advisors to work with us to help elicit your ideas and align us all on the scope. I'm going to turn it over to Jess Zadeb, our project manager, and we're on the right slide for her.
Great, thanks, Malou. Nice to see everyone this morning. Jess Zadeb, I'm a principal regional planner here at Metro and the project manager for this effort. So today is the first of our 2 conversations with staff from HRNA advisors. We're really excited to have them here to facilitate this conversation with you all as a group. You know, we've had some small group conversations with you all over the past 2 weeks about this topic, and would just really encourage everyone to kind of draw on what you discuss with us in those small groups here today when you get the chance to discuss this as a full council. We're here today, February 25th. HRNA staff will be back here on April 8th in a couple weeks, where we can follow up on what we discussed today and really try to nail down those things that we're seeking to do in this scoping process. At the end of these engagements together, we're aiming to walk away with a clear idea of what you all as a council would like the Future Vision Commission to execute and come back to you with a recommendation for, and also a really concrete path forward for what you all want to get out of this process. What is the purpose of creating a vision beyond just the requirement in the charter? What's its function that you can see for the region? We also really feel compelled to acknowledge that today, February in 2025, is a different world from the last time we came to talk to you in September. It may feel like the exercise of conducting a long-range visioning project at this time feels challenging. And we acknowledge that and know that we're operating in a space where thinking 50 years in the future is not something that we can all do easily, but it's also really an opportunity to be more imaginative, to think bigger and think creatively in a way that thinking short-term and implementation focused doesn't always allow us to be. So I just want to encourage everyone to kind of take that expansive view and view this as an opportunity for bigger thinking than we necessarily can do in our day-to-day when we're considering what's happening today, tomorrow, and next week. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Connie Chung from HRNA Advisors, and she will proceed to introduce the agenda and the team as well.
Good morning.
It should be on.
Oh, I think I just turned it off. Is it okay now? All right. Good morning, and thanks Malu, Jess, and Marisa for setting us up for a good conversation. Today we're going to go over some vision development best practices that will really kick off a great discussion, I hope, among the counselors, and really get a better sense of your goals, the topic areas that you expect to see in the future vision, and what you're hoping to get out of the future vision process. The objectives of today's meeting are really threefold. First, to establish a clear understanding of vision development best practices through the examples and research that we've brought. Second, to align on the intended outcomes for the Future Vision project. And third, to begin to identify key elements for the Future Vision process. I think you also heard today that some of the objectives are to all be futurists and to really think big and think of the next generation as well. So first, I want to give a little bit of background about who we are and what we're doing here in the room. I'm with a firm called HRNA Advisors. We are an employee-owned company advising visionary clients on how to increase opportunity and advance quality of life in cities. Our mission statement is to create vital places and build more equitable and resilient communities and improve people's lives. And I mention that because the work that we do is falls under that umbrella in so many different ways, in urban and economic development, in affordable housing, and even equitable broadband access. We'll introduce ourselves shortly, or my colleagues will introduce themselves, but by way of introduction to me, I'm Connie Chung. I use she, her pronouns. I am the partner in charge of our Los Angeles office at HRNA Advisors. We have 6 offices: New York, Los Angeles, Dallas, DC, Raleigh, and Atlanta. And I mentioned that too, that I'm a city planner by training, which I like to mention in different contexts just because it gives me a perspective that I bring of thinking across systems and the interconnectedness of systems. I've worked all over the country on different types of planning projects and have been with the firm about 11 years now, starting in our New York office and now in Los Angeles. I'll let Janine and Jill introduce themselves next.
Thanks, Connie. My name is Janine Clark. I'm a senior analyst with HRNA Advisors. I'm based in Austin, Texas. I use she, her pronouns. And I started my career as an advisor to the mayor of Austin for 7 years. And so I know kind of what you all are facing as local elected officials. At the time, we did a strategic process to help align our policies and direction as a city, align our budget. And I think that that might be informative here. Now in my work, I help advise states on large plans and their federal spending. I help newly elected officials kind of take action from day one. And so we're excited to dive in here in Portland and learn more about you all and what you want to see for your community.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jill Schmidt-Bengochea. I'm the director at HRNA Advisors in our Los Angeles office. I'm from Portland, Oregon, born and raised in the city. And about 10 years ago, we counted, I was a council office interns, staffing the work sessions myself. So it is very fun to be sitting at this table with a microphone. And I always include that in my introductions, no matter where I am, just so you know. But I'm also trained as an urban planner and work very closely with this team, often working on district plans or at the intersection of economic development and parks and real estate. But notably, anywhere from the visioning through the implementation process to bring projects to life.
Right. And I wanted to mention, while we are evidently not of the Portland region, we have some familiarity. There are a few projects listed on this slide that mention, the work that we've done for the City Budget Office, Portland Business Alliance, and Prosper Portland, among others. But I think perhaps more relevantly, our experience is really in a range of organizational visioning and comprehensive and regional planning from around the country. And so, our goal is to help you with the visioning aspect of that. And I just wanted to mention a couple of example projects that might give a sense of our background. For example, with Imagine Boston 2030, which is Boston's comprehensive plan, that really began with a vision for equitable growth and what that could mean. It then, followed with strategies, actions, and implementation. But I think that's really where it started. In the Bay Area, I worked with the 9-county region to develop what's called the framework for the agricultural plan, which again is really setting the stage for the future planning work to think about the diverse and various needs of the 9-county region. And we, developed topics like regional coordination and the topic of farm worker housing that really cross-cut across the counties. For the LA County Department of Regional Planning, we worked on a strategic plan update that really, for the first time, centered racial equity in order to help the department think about how to advance equity in their work, both internally and externally. And in Beverly, Massachusetts, we also led a city government-wide race equity audit that really looked into each department to understand how to operationalize equity.
We're currently working in Pittsburgh on their comprehensive plan. And it's a unique one because it's grounded in the principles of a just transition. It's designed to align some diverse stakeholders on a shared vision for Pittsburgh's future. We kind of mentioned this as something that's underway. We're using strategic visioning, and though it's a comprehensive plan, it's rooted in a vision for the region.
Yeah, and the last one I'll touch on is the equity agenda for San Jose. On behalf of Working Partnerships USA, we engaged 25 or more community organizations to define 10 values to put forth to the mayor that would be elected in 2022 to guide their agenda and anchor it in equity as its core value. It included actions for day one, first day in office, immediate actions to take, as well as the first 100-day work plan to begin realizing those 10 values that were shaped by community organizations there.
So with that sort of background about us and the objectives in mind for today, we wanted to start today, and it's perfect timing, with Council President Peterson walking in. It's perfect timing to begin with a discussion on this kind of big question. And I'd love to go around the room and hear from each of you in turn. What are the two goals that you have that for the future vision process? And I'm happy to allow you a little bit of time to settle in and hear from whoever wants to go first, and then we can sort of go down the line. And we're also looking at the screen to make sure that Councillor Huang and Councillor Lewis are able to participate as well.
Councilors. I'll go this way. I'll open the floor up while President Peterson gets herself together.
And to relieve you, I will note that I plan to facilitate today's discussion, which is, of course, a little bit different than a usual meeting, perhaps, so that we can go through the discussions. But, feel free to, raise your card if you need to. And it looks like we're going to start in this direction or on the screen. Councilor Nolan.
I'd like our vision to be the Portland area's vision and not something that you could just change the name on the cover sheet and have it apply to 100 other regions in the country. In order to do that, I think that means we need to really air and discuss and deliberate on some choices. And collectively, with the input from the commission process, decide which of those forks in the road we want to follow. I hope that you will lead us through a process that gives us the opportunity and kind of requires that we grapple with tough choices.
Thank you.
I'll jump on that real quick, if you don't mind, if the councilors don't mind. I agree with that because we are unique in the sense that we have our urban growth boundary. We have a number of different types of plans that have been developed over years. I can think of East Portland in Motion as one of them, right? What I think about this is when I think about the two goals that I have, again, I think a lot of regions are going to face a lot of the same challenges in terms of the everyday quality of life issues. So connectivity, pedestrian access to transit, better housing. But for me, I want this process to really uplift how, or at least highlight that climate change is real. It's happening. What are the patterns? How can we plan along with and really not plan in a way that is, I'm looking for the word. We aren't just adapting, but we're mitigating the issues. And so I would like to see that, as well as the incorporation of the plans that have been created over time here, because this is the land of plans, if you don't know. And there's a lot of good work, a lot of good time, a lot of resources, government tax dollars that have gone into these plans that are shelved and collecting dust. And so making sure that we are utilizing that information. And then I'll say real quickly, another piece for me is being very serious about what the economic development of the region is looking like. How do we diversify our sectors, bring in more industries? How do we have a conversation about the tax ecosystem that exists that prevents businesses from coming or dissuades them from coming? What does that look like? Because part of the issue is in economic development, we have to provide jobs, but if the employers don't come because we have barriers to them coming, then there's no job creation happening and we start to hit points of stagnation. So those are the things that I'm looking for as we talk about the future growth of this.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis, we understand you may have a time constraint. If I may call on you, feel free to unmute yourself and.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. I am keynoting a lunch that starts in half an hour. But I am super excited for this process to include youth voices. And I do hope that we are looking for creative ways to engage youth who are already so involved in civic life and leadership programs across the community. We don't have to reinvent the wheel here. There are plenty of youth who are leaders in their own right, but we need to engage them and give them forums. And then the other thing is sort of speaking to Councillor Nolan's point, there is a creative vibrancy in this community. And I hope that we see the future vision come out, yes, in government style reports with good planning maps and that sort of documentation, but I also hope it sparks some art and some creative means of communicating the future vision.
Councillor Rosenthal, I saw your hand go up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was distracted by an accidental phone call. First of all, go back to the first slide. My first goal has to do with that first slide. Not that one, not your slide, our slide. The objectives, there you go. I want to expand economic prosperity to include economic prosperity and connectivity. And I think racial equity is very limited. I want to expand that to include ethnic equity, diversity, and inclusion, because diversity is an important element. And it's not just, well, and first of all, I mean, racial is always slightly a misnomer because that's an old term that we keep using. But diversity and inclusivity are important principles that we need to incorporate into this vision. My second goal has to do with the question and protects your response. How dependent are our future vision on the continued existence of a democratic society or a world trade society that is based upon the rule of law?
Thank you.
And I realize you probably can't answer that question, but it's hard to come up with a goal unless that question is answered. My personal feeling is that this process should be delayed a year to see where we are.
Councillor Gonzalez.
Okay. Well, pleasure to meet you and welcome to the team. Very excited to work with you and to tap into the capacity and experience that you have to support the Metro Planning team in this effort. So I feel like we get two goals, so I want to honor that. So if I could have like a pre-goal that we've shared in the past. Hey, I'm asking for permission from my peers. Is that okay?
I want to honor it, but I'm gonna have a third goal.
Thanks, Counselor. Thanks. Well, with the thing that has set up our conversation, and I think is a shared goal, is that we wanted it to be more than just a regulatory check mark. This is something that we're required to do in our charter, and I think we want it to be more than just another process that we go through. So I think that's kind of like the tenor of that. So I wrote two things down here that I would love to see for this process, which is a highly dynamic process that brings all the communities from our region into the fray to generate abundance of housing, of parks, of clean energy, of prosperity. And I think that when I read this great record of the past, I think there's a lot of limits when I see of the composition and of the voices in the communities that were not included at that time. And second, this process to me, I also wanted to be grounded in a roadmap that recognizes the need for an action, kind of similar to what Councillor Simpson was meant, an action plan, but also an investment. And that to me means our region embracing how we want to work with capital, whether that is our own or whether that is global or national or from across the country. I think that is a big question that I feel swirling around. What is our relationship with growth and growing? So, thanks.
Thank you. And I see Councillor Wong's hand up.
Yes, hi, thanks. And let's see, a couple goals for me. I was really struck by kind of your framework around this, or CEO Madrigal's framework around the pace of technology change and really leaning into kind of adaptability and broader strategies. And I'd like to see, as we talk about the future vision, what are kind of the processes and ways of doing business that really reflect who we are in, the 21st century in this region. When I look back on the 1990s vision, it seemed like, and I think many people feel like 20 people kind of set the vision for the whole region. And I don't want that to be the case here. I want to be more inclusive. And I want to think about we have this vision, but part of that vision is how do we make decisions together, and what is that process, and who needs to be engaged and involved, rather than having the static thing that we're moving towards too. I also want to reiterate kind of the importance of existing community visions and tying that all together so that they're not plans on the shelf. There's a lot of exciting community visions that neighborhoods or communities have worked on together all around our region, and that should be compiled somehow. And that's my last point. Isn't really a goal, but another kind of frame is through this process, I don't want to shy away from conflict. I think we have to have some difficult conversations, and it's healthy and good to have some intellectual contrarians to really think through some of the hard decisions that we need to talk about as a region. Because if we set all these goals, but we don't have hard conversations, they're not going to go anywhere. So those are my two goals and a value.
Thank you.
Hello. Sorry I was late. A tree fell on the house, so unbeknownst to me until I walked out the door. So it's a bit of a surprise this morning. Which gets me to probably what CEO Madrigal was talking about with resiliency. So thank you for allowing me to be a little bit late. I think I have dual brains, and they come out a lot. Right, there's my planning brain, and there's my we got to get shit done brain. And I think I'm constantly balancing in this conversation. We've got a lot of plans. We've started a lot of projects, but we also need to give the vision, not give the region a goalpost. So I think what I see in my head is a reckoning of where we are in terms of where we are with 2040, and a lot of heat maps that really map out. We've said a lot of things in our planning along the way, but we have made a lot of assumptions, and I want to start challenging those assumptions. So having been a modeler at Metro, we've done heat maps before, and I'd like to see some of these things that we've set out, like accessibility for parks, accessibility for jobs, accessibility for shopping, even daycare. We need to define our North Star, but we also need to define what we're actually trying to achieve is outcomes on the ground. And I feel like that's all we're talking about at Metro right now is North Stars and key performance metrics. To get to that North Star, it's got to be more than just mom and apple pie goals, right? We need to set some real definitions of what it means for affordability, for accessibility, for economic development. What does it mean to be able to own your own place to live and own your own business or have a family wage job? I think we've had great place-making visions, but we haven't had a vision that actually accounts for people. And I guess that's what my goal would be, is that whatever we're doing, it's about the people and not about the miles of light rail, which I still want to build. But that's a tool to get to the outcome. I think we need to be more upfront and listen to what people need in terms of their outcomes and not be absorbed in the project. So stretch goals, but outcome oriented.
Thank you. Thank you, counselors. We can move on in the presentation. We have 2 more discussion topics for you just to preview. So really appreciate everyone sharing their thoughts candidly.
And our colleague Jill is taking some notes here, and that's really, I think it's helpful to kind of remind yourself of what your fellow counselors' goals are as we go through this, and just as references, we're thinking through things. This next section of the presentation, we're going to be going through some best practices and visioning from across the country, but we wanted to start with kind of why do we vision? And you all really, I think, laid the groundwork very well with your goals and aspirations for this process. But we vision to know what your desired future is and to have a unifying framework. I think that those are some themes that I heard from you all, as kind of to unify where it is that you're going. And in this visual, you can kind of see that your future vision update will eventually, you're going to need to implement it, right? You'll come up with some steps, maybe some measurable goals. And ideally, that will lead into actions and inform things like the 2040 growth concept, that will inform things like your investment areas. And so the vision is the North Star that will guide all of your subsequent actions. So you'll see some themes of that for the different kinds of plans we share with you today. But just kind of think it starts with what are those aspirations and that shared unifying framework for the future. This slide shows just some elements of a vision development process. You know, I heard from you all that you want to hear from youth. You want to hear from some voices that we didn't see in that 1995 plan. And there are some different tools that the examples we will give you used, such as community input, analysis and assessment, creating some vision statements. In some cases, they checked kind of if it does resonate with people. Creating some guiding principles, and then ultimately implementation goals, because we want usable plans. You know, we say that we turn vision into action, and that's kind of our goal for you all, is how do you make this vision become an action? So we have 4 plans that we're going to go over with you all today. Plan Bay Area, Envision Utah, the Puget Sound Vision for 2050, and Charlotte 2040. These show a range of different plans and planning types. I think that the thing I want you all to focus on today is vision. Oh, Councilor Lewis.
Well,
Sure,
there was something else that I wanted to add to this that I forgot to say, is I think we need to challenge existing governance structures and decision-making processes, not just, again, not just placemaking.
Thank you.
I'm not calling on folks. Sorry. Councilor Rosenthal has his hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question. Maybe you can address that when you're going through these different 4. Is one of the areas is connectivity with the rest of the region, in other words, outside of the metro area. And I would like to know more on how their vision included, for example, whether it's the coastal area, I mean, because, you know, Oregon contains many different environments, and includes Southwest Washington as an economic area. So if you could elaborate or at least touch on those when you go through these different areas, I would appreciate it.
Sure, we'll do our best to, and I think the mic might have been low, so I'll just repeat for one moment, connected to not only the region that the plan contained, but its surrounding areas and environments. As we know, government boundaries are arbitrary at times, and there's connectivity between people, resources, and everything else. So we're going to start with Plan Bay Area. And this is an example where they had kind of one statement for their vision to ensure that by the year 2050, the Bay Area is affordable, connected, diverse, healthy, and vibrant for all. And they used 5 guiding principles. I heard you all kind of talk about some values of environment, of people, of housing and affordability. And so this is one way that they organized their vision, is they have an aspiration and then several categories. Something we wanted to highlight about this plan is that it kind of has equity and resilience throughout each topic. And so it's not kind of standalone. So those are a couple of examples of the way that they organized their vision. This 9-county region started with a question of its residents. What are the most important issues we should consider as we plan for life in 2050? That was their guiding question for their community input, for some of their scenario plans that they went through, and then ultimately a blueprint that organized their vision, some of those topics, and put it into goals. Ultimately, this plan became a comprehensive plan, but I think that the things to take away here are that the visioning process kind of laid the framework for them to say, what do we want for our people? How do we get there? And then kind of the tools that they come up with in transportation or in land use planning are kind of a mechanism of implementing that vision. And so you'll see that throughout some of these examples. But I think it's important to kind of remember, what is that question or the guiding framework? What are the things that we want to be asking residents as we go into this future vision process? As we go throughout this presentation as well, we want you all to think about kind of what are some things that are resonating with you? What are some things maybe that you don't like so much? And so be thinking of those as we're going through. I'm going to do one more example and pass it to Jill, and then we'll have a chance to talk through these together. In the Utah example, this one might actually more closely mirror what it is that you're trying to do. It was put together by a nonprofit organization who was co-led by the governor to think about what Utahns wanted to see in the future. This document was not just for governmental bodies, it was for stakeholders, it was for business owners, it was for people in the region to think through, what is it that we want for Utah? Something unique about this is that they actually have 11 vision statements as part of it. So there's an overarching goal. And then for each of their categories, they had 11 vision statements. Something unique about the process that they went through is that they formed some action teams. And so those action teams were subject matter experts across different fields who kind of led conversations around water, around environment, around housing, those principles that they had identified. They did a values study, kind of looking at the values that Utahns hold, some scenario planning to say kind of where will we be at that point in time. And then they took everything they heard and kind of where they thought they wanted to be and took it back to the residents to survey them to say, does this resonate? Does this seem right? Synthesize those answers, and then kind of it became this visioning document. That document, I think the important thing to kind of take away from it is that the governor invoked every different entity to kind of hold that document and to be using it as they're guiding their principles. And so, you know, in terms of clean energy, it's not just for regulation, it's for businesses to be thinking about. And it's a document they all went back to for every entity to kind of work together to get that vision, because our sphere of influence can be only so big, but then when it overlaps, they kind of created the vision that they're trying to see. And with that, I'll pass it to Jill for a couple other plans.
No, go ahead.
Yeah,
Chair-
thank you,
thanks, Madam
Counselor.
Chair.
Yeah.
I'm curious, in Bay Area Plan and Utah and the next two, can you give examples of when their vision statements or collective document has guided a decision that was in conflict? Do they use it to get stuff done?
Yeah, I know this one did. This one had direct impacts immediately. They ended up, I mean, it was done right after 2040 was done and I was on the project team. And it immediately ended up in a light rail line being planned, built, and an entire light rail system was the result of it. They tackled right away the fact that urban renewal, not urban renewal, the definition of, how did they do that? The very thing that they wanted with transit-oriented development and walkable communities was actually called blight in their urban renewal documentation. So they had to work on changing their definition because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to move forward because they would have been building exactly what they said they didn't want. So the governor weighed in, and this was really only for the Salt Lake region. It was not for the entire state, even though it says Utah. It was for the Salt Lake front. It was for the Wasatch Front.
If you could give examples in the next two like that, that would be helpful. Thanks. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
Puget Sound's Vision 2050. I don't know that this one is the most suitable example to that question, Councilor Nolan, but I do have another plan I'll talk about.
Sorry,
That is.
one last thing. They had a ballot measure immediately preceding the adoption of that where business and government got together and worked on the transportation ballot measure and it passed. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Vision 2050 was an update to Vision 2040. So the Puget Sound Regional Council updates their vision periodically as required by their charter. Vision 2050 as an update incorporated equity and climate change, which weren't included in the prior vision. It's one high-level vision statement and includes 11 desired outcomes. You can also see the summary of topic areas on the slide and in front of you. But this is a 4-county region to the earlier question about what the region is. And it outlines the regional growth strategy, but it guides the regional transportation and economic strategy. So it actually lays out the exact principles of the growth strategy, defines places for the growth strategy and the like. It was developed over a 4-month process. This again, I think, is a reflection of it being an update. So it's a much more abbreviated process. They used community listening sessions and public surveys to ask 3 questions. What important regional issues should we focus on? How should the region's growth strategy be updated? And what impacts and actions should be evaluated through environmental review? Charlotte 2040 is it's a city comp plan, so it is not a regional strategy. But what's interesting about Charlotte 2040 for this particular conversation is that it was the first time the city completed a comprehensive plan since 1975. They led this, they started the process in 2020. So that's what, 55 years later. So it was long overdue in terms of guiding planning in the city. And it includes a very robust vision, if you will, a very structured vision. So not only a vision statement that you can see here, but also guiding principles, vision elements, equitable growth framework that laid out metrics, and 10 plan goals. The visioning portion of the comprehensive planning process lasted a little less than a year. And it was done concurrently with the existing conditions analysis. So as the city was collecting and sharing out their spatial analysis, a lot of mapping, they were also engaging the community heavily. This plan won an award for their engagement strategy in part because it started in 2020 and they had to quickly adapt to the COVID-19 pandemic, which resulted in new ways of engaging, such as a drive-in workshop. I saw Councilor Simpson, you raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you. This is interesting, and it makes me think about something as we have this part of the conversation, because it says what's lacking in Charlotte's neighborhoods. As part of the cities y'all identified, was there a concerted effort to go into census tracts that are in persistent poverty. And looking at those as like the starting points of how we have those conversations. I think about our region. We are lucky enough to have an urban growth boundary, but that also allows us to identify those areas like a Rockwood, like a Hazelwood, like a Powhurst Gilbert, that are all constantly impacted by socioeconomic issues, but as well as social built environment and all. And so was there any other city that looked at that level, that granular level of how we're going to really talk about wealth creation and lifting all boats? But like, that's how we get there, I think.
I'm actually thinking not so much of these examples, and I'll let the team also chime in if they have any. But something I've seen in a few different municipalities is something that sometimes it's called an equity index, or it has another name, but this sort of indexing of vulnerability and risk that can be applied. And then that can be used side by side with as the organizations are leading their engagement, looking at who is participating, which of course you can't require the responses, but you collect what demographic data people are willing to share or their zip codes. And then compare how do the responses track against the actual population of a region and or the areas that we want to make sure that we're getting participation from.
When we sit down and do our thing, I want us to look at the census tracts that are in persistent poverty. It's articles, they're out there, it's known. I want us to like be mindful of that and include that in this work.
I think that's why I've got in my head heat maps, because we've mapped those and we have those maps of where the folks are. But what we don't have is who has what, who has the best access to whatever, who has the in terms of outcomes, right? We've just mapped where they're at geographically, but that doesn't mean that they have a disparity in everything, right? And we should have a better idea of where those disparities are based on the outcomes we want.
And I agree. And I think, that's why I said the census tract level, because you can look at educational attainment, you can look at a series of issues that's impacting the community, whether it's access, jobs, whatever. That's why I'm looking at that level.
I only want to add that the best, the team that will do this for you will interrogate all the existing data and mapping on populations across every type of measure. But I think it's really important that what Councilor Simpson and Council President Peterson have said is really to incorporate that as a fundamental sort of premise of the future vision itself.
Yeah, I mean, it to me, I'm like, if we know that poverty exists now in 2025, why aren't we moving in a direction where we want to plan? Like, it'll exist, but how do we mitigate as much of it as possible in our planning process? I know it's high in the sky, but like at least through planning.
And there are great examples. So for example, Pittsburgh has published its equity indicators report. It updates that periodically so that, it's essentially a comprehensive mapping of what you're talking about. And it's very possible. It should be, sort of a requirement, a baseline for how you do the planning.
This is roughly the last slide. And it's a quick one. I just want to touch on implementation. This will probably be something we discuss more in our next workshop, but I want to keep it front of mind for everyone. Implementation can be as streamlined as the Puget Sounds Vision 2050, which lays out the exact policy and planning areas that the charter requires it to, and otherwise serves as a guide and meets that charter mandate. It's checking that regulatory box from the earlier discussion. And there's also ways that implementation can be incorporated and go deeper, to your question, Councilor Nolan, and putting this plan in action that a number of you named as an interest here. Charlotte 2040, for example, includes a short-term set of actions and identifies lead agencies, supporting agencies, really maps out that initial roadmap to start realizing what's included in the comprehensive plan. And another plan that we didn't really discuss, but I want to mention here is Detroit Future City, which was a strategic framework that was completed in 2012. And Detroit Future City was led by the city. They had a team of consultants, but it exists today in a bound book. And I have seen it in every single office I have ever entered in the city of Detroit. That was true 8 years ago when I first went to Detroit, and it was true last year when I was in the Downtown Business Improvement District's office. It is in every city planning office. This is a plan that has never sat on a shelf. It is on people's desks. And so a seed to plant and something to ask you to continue thinking about over these next 6 weeks until we see you again, is how you would like to see this vision live on and what form it really takes in that day-to-day work. And great to hear that this is already top of mind for the group. And I said it was roughly last just because these next 2 slides are the ones you have printed out in front of you. So there is no need to dwell here, but we did want to summarize some of what we've gone over from each of the 4 plans in terms of what the vision really includes, the agencies that led the visioning process, the role of stakeholder steering committees, because all of this varied across all 4. And also summarize the vision topic areas that were explored, which you'll also see vary. Some show up more than others: economy, environment, housing, and transportation being some of the most consistent. And we've included the future vision from 1995's topic areas for reference with that as well. And I'm going to turn it back over to Connie to lead off our discussion, and I'll be taking some live notes.
Right, well, we have, it looks like about 30 minutes to discuss the next 2 topics. The first one is to think about how can the future vision help our region? And as you're thinking about the answer to that question, we'd certainly love to hear aspects of the example plans that you found particularly inspiring in thinking about how the impact of the future vision can be felt. So again, I'm happy to call on folks, but I'm sure you're not shy and you'll raise your hand.
Counselors? Counselor Wong, are you still on?
Yeah. Oh, good. Future. There he is. What do you think, G?
No comments.
No comments? What do you mean?
Well, I'll just make a comment that I made before. One of the things that all the future visions that I find uninspiring is that none of them included connectivity with the area outside of their region, which I think is important, particularly in the West, particularly cities of Portland, with Puget Sound, with the Oakland, the Bay Area, with the Front Range, and with Denver, even with Atlanta, even with Minneapolis, St. Paul. We've developed economic sheds and cultural sheds, and also, recreational sheds that are much larger than just the core values. And so at least not to pay some attention to that and not include that connectivity. We face a particular problem here in Oregon that we have a strong effort on parts of the state to secede and join Idaho because they don't feel, because there's this tendency they feel that Portland hates them and they hate Portland. So not to address this connectivity for a future vision really is something that I think it's not a major component, but it needs to be addressed.
So there's opportunity in thinking outside the region and our neighbors.
Yeah.
Yes.
Counselor Gonzalez, I saw your hand.
Yeah, for sure. I think these feel like super relevant examples for many reasons. I think Charlotte in particular is seen as a region very similar sized to Portland, and so I appreciate the example there. In Utah, of course, I think Portland and Salt Lake are working towards a baseball team, so we'll see. Anyway, I think particularly it's good to ground ourselves that everyone is kind of working through the same things, in terms of our futures. And I am inspired by Counselor Nolan's comment about how we build a plan that doesn't just change the name of the city and it feels like it applies. Something that is truly unique to us. And so I think also having the last future vision plan, and even with the preamble and the context and the introduction about the community here, I think an acknowledgement of our ecology, of and I think there's already this work is already so deeply embedded in Metro and set up the parks bonds and our acquisition strategy and all that. But I think a connection to ecology, I think also I think, I mean, having grown up here, I think there are a lot of labels that have been placed on the Portland area by the world or by the country, some that I don't relate with personally, or that I might not be super proud of. And I think for me, it's like at a very high level, it's like, how do we emerge in the future for that? And so I'm kind of curious to dive into these more, to see how these other regions are also thinking about their brand or their reputation, just because we're in a moment right now in our region where those things feel particularly hurt. And we're in this place where I think people that live outside of the region or inside of the region, regardless of their interest in us, I think there is a desire for this region to meet its goals and its potential. And so again, I thought it's like very high level, but I'm just kind of sharing this is what is going through my mind right now. And I think we're meant to be in a high level space as we work to kind of do this scoping work. So maybe more ideas will come and I'm happy to share them. But yeah, that's what's going through my mind.
Thank you.
I'm looking at the best practices sheet here and the way in which this was done, because I think we're still talking about process. We already have determined that we will have a commission that has some elected officials on it, but is more tilted toward people not in elected position, but leaders of activities in the region, BIPOC leaders, business leaders, education leaders. And I think that's a good decision we've made. We are anticipating, as I understand it, a series of listening sessions. I would hope you can give us some help in that area to construct those listening sessions, to frame them and to recruit for participation in them in a way that helps residents, business owners, workers in the region feel that it's something that they can influence and that matters to them. Too often, and I would personally say Metro sometimes falls into this as well, we just put out a notice saying, hey, we're going to be talking about this topic. Come and give us your ideas, without using the social infrastructure to make that relevant to. Counselor Simpson talked about people who are struggling with financial circumstances, and, you know, come out and spend 2 hours at a meeting feels like not in this lifetime. So both framing it and structuring them so that we can in fact get input from the people who usually don't participate in these, or whatever their circumstance is. Secondly, and structure the input so that we ask them about their expertise, and everybody is an expert in their own lives. And I want to hear what they want their lives and their neighbors' lives and their kids' lives to be like. I think we should de-emphasize in those settings the mechanics of how we get there. Subject matter experts can bring that in. And sometimes subject matter experts bring in implementation steps that initially aren't so intuitively obvious, let alone popular with the general public. The New York City exclusion zone in Manhattan is one that comes to mind that could be relevant here, notwithstanding its federal challenge now, but it was not an idea that most folks living or working in Manhattan wanted. But once implemented, they now don't want it to stop. And if we had only heard from residents about the mechanics of getting to easy crosstown movement, improved air quality, the kinds of outcomes, New York City probably wouldn't have done that. So using everyone to bring expertise, whether expertise is my own life or expertise is this is how congestion mechanisms in major cities succeed, that's what I'd like us to balance.
Thank you.
Counselor Wong?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm still on the how we do business kind of mindset. And it'd be interesting also to talk about like local preparedness for maximizing like state and federal grants, and also how we want to approach public-private partnerships. I think that's one thing that we're seeing increasingly for all our work. Whether it's arts venues or sports venues, it's like everything will be done kind of through public-private partnerships. What does that mean? And then also struck by like how our region didn't get a single EPA community change grant. And I think some of these are indicators of like what we need to do to prepare our region to be competitive. So yeah, kind of just on that, like how do we want to operate and organize ourselves kind of mindset. And I think that's what will make this vision ambitious and implementable at the same time.
Thank you.
So all of these are around the 20-year plan time period. And I have had one map that has ruled my entire world for 30 years, and that's the Metro 2040 growth concept. And there's still a lot of it yet to build out. It is a 50-year plan. So I think what we're struggling between is the here and now of the 5-year, the 20-year, and the 50-year. And I think we're all struggling with the need to show that we're listening to actual people's needs with successful implementation in a stepwise manner towards a goal that we've all agreed on, whether that's the 20-year or the 50-year. So I think we need to have the inspiration of the 50-year sitting out there. We need the 20-year to say exactly where we're heading because of everything around us is regulatory around 20 years. But we need to show that we can implement within the 5-year. And I think what you're hearing is that we don't have the tools in this region to actually really get implementation done in any big way. And we've been struggling through that. And we look in the couch cushions to find money for projects. And it's an absolute scramble for everything. So is there a way that we can start putting smaller pieces together in the short term to get success on smaller bites rather than going after bigger bites. And I think we've seen some of that come to fruition just with our bus rapid transit system work. But I guess when I look at this, the one that inspires me the most is Utah. I think they're much more upfront with each other about plain language, what they're trying to achieve. I think they're much more pro-business, small, medium, and large. I think we need to be more clear about what type of business we are supporting in this region and what type of values that we hope that they bring to our region, because we are losing people and jobs at this point. It's not 1995, right? So we have an immediacy that we need to get out of. But I like this idea of creating basically these these work groups that essentially start working on different parts of this equation, because we don't recognize our public lands in the Metro 2040 growth concept, yet we are based on frickin' tourism. We've never made that connection because we have never made economic development one of our guiding principles. We've talked about the urban growth boundary and agriculture, and that we aren't required to, but maybe we should be looking at the value of agriculture outside of our urban growth boundary when we make an urban growth boundary expansion decision, because different areas have different impacts on agricultural business practices. But yet we don't accommodate that. We have not, we've been struggling with disaster resiliency. So I think all of these things kind of push what we've been working on recently to bigger discussion about the problems regionally. And I think we need to differentiate how the cities are dealing with some of these other problems versus how we're bringing them together to make it a coordinated plan. I think sometimes we're getting in the weeds of what the cities and the counties ought to be doing. But having a goal is a good thing, but who's doing it, who's responsible, what the measures of success are, and how we're actually giving the carrots and the sticks to get there. That's what Metro 2040 was about, there are requirements and then there are incentives in terms of the funding. So we need more tools. We might need more conversation around the things that we don't have direct authority on agriculture, but we have an impact on agriculture. So we should be looking at the things that we have impacts on, not just the things that we have direct authority over. And I think that's what 2040 is a outcome of, is looking at what you have direct authority over.
Yeah, I was inspired, but so I want to keep growing on that. And like you're trying to facilitate a dialogue, right? So
Please.
I'm leaning in.
My goal is a discussion.
Yeah, the discussion. I mean, I think too, so a lot of good things have been shared. And again, like looking at this through the lens of task force, and also what Councilor Nolan mentioned around, like, people are experts in our everyday lives. And so I think it would be so wonderful if we were able to have questions about, like, high level, like we want Portland, the Portland area, to be a great place to raise a family or something. I mean, like, and then kind of pull back those things about, well, what does that mean? It means that we have childcare, we have great schools. It means we have all these things, right? And I think that from there could be such a special mandate for us to work on those things. So I'm thinking about also how we can do goal planning outside of what sometimes I feel is like the wonkiness of the planning process. You know what I mean? Like there is a wonkiness built into that. And
as a planner, I concur.
Yeah. But everyone for the most part wants to leave a better place, and to leave it better than we found it. And so I think right now, kind of coming back to my comments, the last section is, if we can get people in that energy of like, we're going to leave it better than we found it, and getting people rowing in the same direction, with these like really deep goals, to me, that feels special. And is the kind of process that can help our region turn, and there's no better way to say this, but like the vibes corner, like we need the vibes are low. And we need to work on that. So, yeah.
My outcome of all of this would be that we have the inspiring pictures, we have the book, we have the map, right? Those are the things that we leave and hopefully inspire the next generations. But you send this council, because by the time this is done, it's gonna be a different council. You send them off with the to-do list, right? We've had one regional investment strategy before. What is that regional investment strategy going forward, and what does it look like? Does it look like Oklahoma City, where they say, this is what the 5 things the region needs to survive and thrive, and we're just gonna focus on that? Or is it a bunch of peanut butter? I don't know. But we need a regional investment strategy in order to move it forward.
Yeah.
I want the new map.
The new
I've been
map.
looking at it for 30 years.
We should be mindful as well that we have collectively ignored what the people 30 years ago left as a to-do list for us. We're not following the 1995 plan or vision. And we should think about why it is not something that is in front of every ordinance that's brought to us. And our staff says, this is how it furthers the vision there. So that if we hope to influence people who will be sitting in these chairs 10 years from now, because I think none of us will, it has to be something that earns its place sitting on the table instead of on the shelf.
Yep.
Every month, it has to be relevant and an actual integrated part of our decision-making. Or if we don't follow our own guidance, we don't have much hope that another group of leaders will prioritize it.
Yep. It's an interesting observation, because when I look at these folks that were on and gave quotes, I have said that I feel like the transition generation to the next generation from this generation. And we didn't create the next one of these. There's a huge gap. And it's because we didn't update this. So how do we give ownership to each generation as it comes through of the new checklist, the new goalpost? How does it change? We didn't put that into this at all, and it's created a lot of problems. A total lack of leadership.
This is a great discussion.
Counselor, oh, I'm sorry, Counselor Rosenthal has his hand
sorry,
up.
I didn't see that.
And you all are doing an amazing
Comment.
job, and I'll transition to the next question momentarily.
Just a comment. I'm not entirely in agreement with Counselor Nolan. I haven't seen an analysis. If I look at the values, and we had a bunch of values in this 1995 document, I think we have made efforts in some regards to follow some of those values. The world has changed around us in ways that we could not imagine then. But so until I have a chance to actually think about all of these values and say, what have we done? Until we have an evaluation of sort of where are we, 100%, 50%, 20%, I guess I'm a little reluctant to say that we have failed the past vision entirely. So
I took it more as a process of how do we instill this into the future. I don't want to speak on your behalf, Counselor, but it's not that we've not done things. It's more of how do we start walking through whatever we set forward and making it a part of our daily lives rather than something that we pick up and look back on.
There are 2 levels that I was addressing. One is, are the vision statements so generic that we could make any proposal that comes to us fit inside? That's not much of a guidance to me. The second is, if they're generic and we happen to be advancing them in some of the decisions we make? Is it because they're universal or because a group of people went through a process 30 years and left this guidance for us? And I would argue it is the former, that they are universal. And frankly, here may be where this document has influenced. Some of the values here are embedded in policies that the
Right.
council has adopted and does review.
So speaking of that 1995 plan, which included 17 topics in 3 areas, the individual, or 3 levels, I'll say, the individual level, our society, and then our place. So listed here on the slide and also on the vision topics handout are those 17 topics that, you know, under which there are descriptions and explanations of what those values are. I want to think about the recent conversations that you've had as a council, and emphasizing potential new topics to add, or to really emphasize and focus on in the future vision. What, you know, we've heard about economic prosperity, about racial equity, about climate adaptation, resiliency, about arts and culture. What feels missing from that?
Sports.
What needs to be emphasized? I hear sports. And that's the question for the next, our last 8 minutes together.
Sorry, I don't see sports as arts and culture, so I just wanted to specify. There's a lot of sports conversations going on, investment in existing and new.
I like that personally, like thinking about a lens of sports or sports tourism or maybe it's like
Yeah.
because I mean, Metro does manage some of the most critical
Yeah.
tourism venues of the region. And so I think that feels like a really.
To take
clear-
arts and culture and sub it to tourism with everything else.
Yeah,
Councilor Rosenthal.
Culture isn't just tourism, though.
yeah. Yeah, it's a
It
little
serves the local community.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
point.
think when I think about arts and culture, I think about like, you know, ultimately I'm hoping that our role as a species is not to work until we die. It's to create and it's to express and and that's what arts and culture means to me. So I do think it's different, right? But like, but I think that's also the great thing of a broad-based theme that it helps us fit into those things. But I do think that the specific sports and tourism might fit within these. It might not, but it might be its own new bubble in terms of the future.
Thank you. Councilor Rosenthal, I see your hand and I also see Councilor Huang's.
Oh, if you want to go to Councilor Wong first, go ahead.
Counselor, you were
first.
called on. Let's stick
All
to the
right. Well,
format.
first
Thank
of
you.
all, I always consider sports parts of culture, but that perhaps should be expanded, say arts, culture, and community, because sports creates communities, different kinds of communities, not necessarily geographically based. So that's an important element. But my question is, what did you mean by roots in your previous slide? I have no idea what you're talking about, which other than diversity, which is people's origin stories.
Allow me to find.
It was in the plan.
page
It says
In,
number of designated structures saved, demolished, number of annual celebrations of place and history by community. That's,
Comes under diversity to me, but,
well, I mean, that was the past commission.
okay.
They wanted to frame roots into, I'm guessing into the history or historic buildings or like what are the things that you could never replicate somewhere else, because like, for example, you can't replicate the Willamette River. There's only one Willamette River.
Or the Piddock Mansion. So you're talking about regional cultural
I'm
roots.
talking about my interpretation of
Okay,
what
okay.
I read here.
I
That's
missed
what I'm
that-
talking
I missed
about,
that
sir.
section.
No, you're good.
Slide 10,
I
Counselor.
don't think they intended it to include diversity because they start their whole document talking about the white man's invasion of the region.
Yeah, that was pretty problematic, huh?
Restart. Yeah, 1805.
In 1805.
So,
Lewis and Clark.
so for your reference, it's page 10 of the Future Vision
Oh, yeah.
doc.
Well,
And
there's more.
you may have your own interpretation.
One of the, where we started from,
Oh,
of
thank
the
you.
pieces that isn't really reflected in here is that the Metro 2040 growth concept is still a major player, and we need to keep the stability of that. Otherwise, we're changing zoning and codes again. And I don't know if that's our intent, but that we've gone beyond the Metro 2040 growth concept just within the centers and corridors. We have new centers that we have actively been developing that are not part of our 2040 growth sum. So they need to be reflected in that, and we need to ask whether there's any more that we should know about. And start including those in and start looking at the ways in which they need to be connected into the existing plan.
Counselor Wong?
Yeah, I mean, I think amongst all of these, there's just so much kind of overlap between what I'm seeing on the screen right now. And I'd really like to think about, I think some people say, when you live in Portland, our region in Oregon, you get this like living dividend because of, access to clean air and water. And we have mountains, we have beaches, we have wine country. So I think this is all like interconnected in that there are things that make our region attractive to live, even if we do have, a certain tax rate or whatever. And what are those things and how do we lean into those more is kind of what I'm looking at. And these four are all elements of that.
Yeah. So I think one other thing to consider is that we did not, even though it's in the Oregon Land Use Planning Program, and we are supposed to be doing it in our comprehensive land use plans, and we don't, is that we really don't acknowledge energy and the energy grid that's going to be required, especially with the ever increasing dependence on electricity. So how do we even get to 50 years if we don't have those energy problems figured out? And then we also have, we are in a race to the bottom when it comes to our water rights in the region as we grow. And it's not something that was tackled last time. It was certainly part of Envision Central Texas. That was the motivating factor, is that they only had so much water and they were growing at a high rate. So I think we have some definite problems that we have not included in our plan that we should be tackling as part of our, it's not climate adaptation, but it's resiliency.
Mm-hmm. And as you probably know, that was a big part of the Envision Utah plan, thinking about the resources that could support growth sustainably into the future.
I mean, I'm not looking at a carrying capacity. I'm looking at how do we accommodate growth. I want to be very clear about that because I don't agree, and I never did, with the carrying capacity concepts and that were being discussed back in 1995 because it really reflected the culture that I don't agree with of Oregon, that we've got ours, you can stay out. So I think we just want to be careful about how we put that. I mean, we definitely have some issues, but that doesn't mean that they're insurmountable if we tackle them.
With 1 minute left. Is this my slide? Okay. We will be back, as we've talked about, to have a second discussion with you on April 8th. And we're really excited for that. What we'll do following this session is to summarize key takeaways and continue to probe with questions about the future vision process. And the goal for our 2 sessions is to, again, emerge with a clear idea of the charge for the Future Vision Commission, as Jess and Malou referenced. I should remind everyone that the applications for Future Vision Commission close on April 15th. So there's still time, and there will be time when we meet again on April 8th. But please do get those candidate names in. Anything else that we should do before we wrap? Well, thank you all for such a great discussion and for, again, your willingness to engage in discussion and to meet with us. We look forward to April 8th.
Thank you. Much appreciated. All right, we will look forward to seeing you back here and move on to Chief Operating Officer Communication. Lisa,
Good morning. I don't have any updates for you today. I know you have an executive session.
thank you. Counselors, any updates? Counselor Wong? Just making sure you're, okay. Anybody? All right. We are adjourning out of the council work session, and our next regularly scheduled meeting is scheduled for Thursday, this Thursday, the 27th at 10:30 a.m. We will now move into an executive session held pursuant to ORS 192, sub 660, sub 2, sub H, to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed, and ORS 192.660, sub 2, sub F, to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection. Counselors, we will meet in room 375 for executive session. Only members of the news media and designated staff may attend. Thank you.